Hello everybody. My name is Jonathan Rufrano. Thank you for joining our panel, NFTs, Navigating Fair Treatment. I'm a policy director here at the Digital Chamber, where I lead our policy portfolios on consumer innovation, decentralization, and NFTs. NFTs have quickly grown from digital collectibles to critical tools for industries like art, gaming, and real estate. But while technology has matured, regulation hasn't kept up, leaving creators, companies, and consumers in legal limbo. That uncertainty has deepened as the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, began to question whether NFTs writ large are securities. Without clear rules, innovation stalls, and that's where today's conversation begins. Last December, Congressman William Timmons, who is joining me on stage, introduced the New Frontiers in Technologies Act, or the NFT Act, a bipartisan bill that clarifies that the majority of NFTs are consumer products, not securities. To explore the bill, the future of NFTs, and how policymakers are approaching the space, I'm joined by Congressman William Timmons, who represents South Carolina's 4th District. He serves on the House Financial Services Committee, House Committee on Oversight and Reform, and chairs the Military and Foreign Affairs Subcommittee within the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. I'm also joined by Alex Levine, General Counsel and Chief Regulatory Officer at Dapper Labs, the company behind the original NFT protocol standard, and a leader in innovation and regulatory engagement. Gentlemen, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Let's jump right in. So, Congressman Timmons, what motivated you to introduce the NFT Act, and how do you envision it fostering innovation while providing regulatory clarity?
Sure. Thanks for having me. We're going to do a lot this Congress on digital assets. We're going to pass a market structure bill probably in the next 6 months. We're going to pass stablecoins. But that's really just the beginning point of making sure that the United States economy is the best place to start and build any kind of business. And the future is technology. The future is blockchain. The future is digital assets. And so tokenization is a critical component of that. And I was hoping originally that we were going to include it in one of the initial bills, but because of jurisdictional issues, we're going to have to wait probably until the end of the year, maybe early next year. But I do feel that we're going to get NFT Act passed. And it's just important because we got to have regulatory clarity. We can't have this regulation by enforcement, and we got to have certainty to make sure that businesses are investing in the U.S. We've seen so many businesses go overseas because of the uncertainty surrounding the future digital assets and blockchain in the U.S. So I'm excited about this. We're going to get it done. It's going to be a big year for digital assets and for blockchain.
We're really excited to continue joining you and pushing this forward. Congressman, you mentioned regulation by enforcement. Alex, from your perspective, how has this SEC overreach impacted business development for Dapper and other NFT technology providers?
Yeah, I mean, it created an environment where it created an environment where there was always questions about what exactly could be developed, how it could be developed, and where it could be developed. So I would say from Dapper's perspective, Dapper was sort of a pioneer in, we have partners, the NBA, the NFL, and Disney, so we were very much in the US market, willing to navigate the US market. We also had a high level of capitalization, so we had to spend a lot of resources understanding what we could and could not do from a legal perspective. I mean, for example, we learned that we actually were under SEC investigation at one point, even though we didn't even know about it until we got a FOIA request from a journalist. So the overhead costs are just extraordinary. So I think that impacted how a lot of companies chose to develop in the United States. But I think more importantly, from Dapper's perspective, our partners, the NBA, the NFL, and Disney, they're all very well-established, risk-averse companies. And so while the NBA was very much willing to tread this path, and we're thankful that the NFL and Disney followed them, anytime we wanted to innovate or expand beyond the initial product reach, we would get questions both from their business teams and their legal teams saying, well, are you sure that you can do this? Can you do this? So even though people were willing to make those first steps, the pace of acceleration really was not where it is. I like to say now, I can tell, our development teams, our engineers, like, go think about it, go wild, because, I don't have to worry about someone coming in and questioning the company just because, you have a new product or a new game or a new token.
And I want to jump in and just say, unfortunately, that wasn't just digital assets. The last administration used the government across all businesses, across all industries, to try to get them to do things with this uncertain regulatory scheme. So that's gone. That is gone. President Trump is going to fix that, and Congress is going to follow suit.
Well, I think we're already seeing that today, based on some of the SEC's actions they've taken to drop enforcement cases, to drop investigations in digital asset companies. We think that there's more to do on NFTs for sure within the SEC. We think that there may be some action coming there, so stay tuned. But Congressman Timmons, how do you strike the right balance between regulating today's markets and leaving room for future innovation?
This is one thing that Congress always gets wrong. I mean, I use the 1996 Communications Decency Act. The Section 230 is a thorn in the side of Congress, and we've got to figure out a way to update it within reason. I mean, liability protections for internet companies is something that was required in 1996, but doesn't really make sense to the same degree now. So I think about that a lot when I'm thinking about our current situation. We're trying to figure out a way to make sure that the United States is the best place to start to build a business for digital assets and for blockchain. So how do we learn from the 1996 Communications Decency Act, and how do we build on it? I mean, I've got a lot of ideas on how we can do that, but at the end of the day, we got to find a way to revisit this in 5, 10, 20 years without creating uncertainty. And that's the biggest thing. The number one thing we need is a regulatory scheme that people can rely on, but they also need to rely on that regulatory scheme being updated appropriately. And that's the biggest trick that we got to figure out how to do, and we're working on it. At the very least, we just got to create the regulatory scheme. But I think it would be better to make sure that Congress is coming back 5, 10, 15, 20 years. This is not an area of the law that needs to be static for decades. This is an area of the law that needs to be updated with a very delicate touch to make sure that we're the tip of the spear as opposed to just following other countries. And I think that we have that opportunity, and I think we're going to get it right.
That's great. I think that's a very good idea. The technology is not static, to your point. The use cases are evolving. Alex, I'd love to hear from you. What emerging use cases are most exciting to you? And which of those are being held back by the current regulatory uncertainty?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the use cases are just people being innovative and really sort of taking those limiters off that I discussed previously. I mean, at Dapper, we had our initial NFT projects. We're now going into gaming environments. And you no longer have questions about, tokens. What are they in games? Are they payment instruments? Are they securities? At the end of the day, people can go develop. They can make great products, and people can use them, and that's amazing. I think you also see, again, lots of talk about AI on the previous panel. The intersection between NFTs and AI, right? AI has a huge authentication problem. What authenticates? Well, blockchain and NFTs specifically. So now you see sort of the cross uses that blockchain can do, and I think the industry now can go forth and put together those sort of statements about what the value can be. AI is a great example. Everyone sort of inherently understands what the value of AI is. Unfortunately for blockchain, it's seen a bit of too much of as a casino and not as much of a sort of a core product as what it really is.
Congressman, what are your thoughts on this?
Look, this is the future. It is the future. And the intersection of decentralized finance, of blockchain, of digital assets, of tokenization, all of these things are going to change the world in much the same way the internet did. So I'm just very excited, and I think that we have an opportunity here. The U.S. economy has led in the global economy for decades and decades. And if we get this right, it'll be for hundreds of years. But if we don't do it, it would be the end of the U.S. economy. So one, elections matter. Elections matter. And the November election is going to see, as we have seen, a shift in policy from the executive branch. You're going to see Congress get off their ass and actually do their job, and you're going to have answers to the questions that everyone has been asking, and we're going to make it clear. And we're going to protect consumers, but we're going to allow for investment in technologies that will transform our society and make everything drastically more efficient. That is the future. That is the future. But for this election, I got to tell you, we probably weren't going to be the center of the future of digital assets and of blockchain. We just weren't. So this is a huge opportunity. We're going to get it right. It's going to take 6 to 12 months, and we're going to have a big party at the White House. Everybody's invited.
No, and that's great. I mean, to follow on, I think you hit it on the head, Congressman. projects should really be worried about, the consumer protection ramifications of what they're doing. Again, if there's fraud, if there's malevolence, right, that's where government should be focusing its resources. In good projects, where they're trying to do good things and put in the protocols, put in the controls, put in the compliance programs, they should be allowed to build and go forth. And that's the world, hopefully, we're now in, with the administration change.
Well, Congressman and Alex, but especially the Congressman, it's so refreshing to hear remarks like yours, looking at the bigger picture of technology innovation and how that affects the overall U.S. economy, geopolitics, and the U.S. society writ large. I think a lot of your colleagues, and rightfully so, it is their job to get into the minutia. Some of them are looking at the short-term ramifications in terms of classifications of securities versus commodities, of digital assets kind of overall, including NFTs. But, it's very refreshing, as I mentioned, just to see members of Congress like yourself that are thinking about this at a higher order. So very much appreciated that.
I do want to just say this. This is not a partisan issue. I mean, generally speaking, Republicans don't want the government to be an impediment to a business's success. And the Democrats try to use the government to implement their policies at every turn. But this is a bipartisan issue. I mean, this bill is co-sponsored by Rich Torres, and I mean, he is adamant that this is the future. And I mean, I would say at least half of the Financial Services Committee is supportive of all of these endeavors. The problem is the people in the previous administration that were surrounding President Biden, they just wanted to control maximum, to have maximum control over the future, and they saw this as an area that they couldn't control. And I think that was the issue. But look, we had an election, we're done. We're going to get a lot of bipartisan support surrounding all of these issues because most of half the Democrats view this as the future, and we got to get it right, and we got to lead on it, and we can't lose this sector of the economy overseas because it would just be very tragic.
I definitely agree with that. To your point, the U.S. has led in all of the major leaps forward in technology over the last century and a half. We need to make sure that we do that for blockchain technology and for NFTs as well. But there are other jurisdictions like the EU and Singapore that are moving forward with digital asset frameworks. How urgent is it really for us to act on clear legislation like the NFT Act here in the U.S.?
I'll start. I mean, we're clearly behind. I mean, that's very straightforward. We're clearly behind. But I think that we have all of the ingredients to get this right. I think we have all of the ingredients to lead. I think we have all the ingredients to even extend our regulatory framework, our stablecoins bill, our tokenization bill to the global community. I mean, whatever we do over the next 12 months is going to be the framework that the global economy adopts. And I actually think that we can do things to incentivize them to adopt it. I mean, look at cybersecurity. I mean, we're so far behind in cybersecurity legislation in the United States, it's not even funny. And, California's gone first in the U.S., and then you got GDPR in Europe. And they went first, but they got it wrong. I mean, GDPR is overly complex. It is constraining their economy in a way that is imbalanced. It is imbalanced. It has too much consumer protections and too much disclosure requirements. Nobody cares. They just want to stop clicking buttons. I mean, but the other side is we can learn from that. And again, the U.S. economy is the largest economy in the world, and what we do matters. I think everyone else is going to follow suit, and I think that when we get it right here in the next 6-12 months, you're going to see everyone else kind of get on board, and this is just going to take off.
Yeah, to that point, I mean, Europe, the EU, especially, with MiCA, has sort of been ahead of the curve here in the U.S. But I think the U.S., now that they're thinking of reopening MiCA into a second round, the U.S. is going to have a big ability to really have that impact. I mean, as to NFTs specifically, the first round of MiCA specifically and intentionally omitted NFTs. So if the U.S. can lead here through the NFT Act, through other means, we can set that stage and have it go forward. And I think it's important not only internationally, but even within the U.S., right? You have states looking to regulate both consumer products from an NFT standpoint as well as other crypto assets. So if Congress can get its act together and get these bills passed, it will set that precedent and really allow the industry to have certainty emanating from the U.S. both upwards into the world as well as downward to the state level.
I hate to hear if Congress can get its act together. Oh God, I've been in Congress 6 years. That makes my stomach sink. But no, I actually do have faith for a lot of reasons that we're going to get this right and that we're going to pass market structure, stablecoins, and then tokenization. And it's going to be a time order thing, and we're going to get it done 6-12 months.
Well, Alex, we've been talking about the impact of the U.S. economy, but I'd love to hear from you. What are the real impacts here? What are the material impacts? How have NFT projects or partnerships for Dapper moved overseas due to regulatory uncertainty in the U.S.?
Well, I mean, in Dapper's case, I wouldn't say things have moved overseas. I think a lot of other companies have moved operations overseas because of the heft of our partnerships. Again, Disney, NFL, and NBA, we've had that sort of anchoring effect, which I think is great, but not every creator, not every company sort of has that sort of heft. But where the big impact is, in terms of Dapper and its products, is now seeing the way that companies are willing to expand into this. Disney's a great example. When Bob Iger came back as a CEO for the second time, all of a sudden he reinstituted a Web3 division, in the aftermath of the election. All of a sudden executives at Disney are going to Dapper and saying, what can we do with your technology to really expand the reach? And that's great for Dapper, but it's also great, again, for the ingenuity and innovation in the US. I used to like to use the example, there's no reason that your ticket going into the Disney park shouldn't be an NFT. And that NFT, Disney shouldn't be able to market to you specifically, and that you shouldn't be able to interact with your friends, right? So not only is everyone having a better experience at the park, Disney's making more money, Dapper's doing better, and that's the innovation that drives things, just as the Congressman noted, like the internet, right? The internet unlocked a lot, this will unlock a lot, and it's really getting rid of those transaction costs at the end of the day. And I mean, as a lawyer myself, yes, it's going to be a lot better for everyone. There's less of me in the room on a day-to-day basis, at the end of the day, and that's really a good thing.
That's great. Oh, we have a functioning mic. Yeah, great. One of the things that is still very present is the role of IP and the challenges that we're facing in IP in this space. So what are some of the biggest legal or contractual challenges in bringing IP into NFT ecosystems?
Yeah, this is something we face every day, right? Because when you think about what an NFT is, it's really just a bundle of IP rights that you're buying, just as if you buy anything else. Unfortunately, and I think it's a good thing for the technology, when people think they're buying a token on the blockchain, they think they're sort of getting ownership over that token. And that's true as far as the embedded smart contract that does govern the token. But if you buy an NBA Top Shot, you're getting a limited license right to utilize the image that you're buying on the blockchain for personal purposes, right? An artist could sell an NFT and give you all the rights to use that token for those purposes. So the IP questions here are just sort of put to the forefront about how people use them, how they're ultimately given or sold, when you're buying something. At Dapper, and we started working on this with A16Z and other major players within the blockchain space, we sort of said, okay, since there's so many IP rights embedded in any sort of copyright or anything else, it might be useful to ensure that consumers are knowing what they're getting. So why not have sort of standardized tiers of IP rights that people can enter into when they're creating NFTs, so consumers aren't sort of saying, well, you're getting 66% here and 65% there, because that's not good for business if consumers are ultimately confused about what they're getting and what they can do with it.
Well, I think, that's still, of course, going to be a challenge, but I think we can figure out a lot of the legislative challenges. And Congressman Timmons, I think we will, as to your point, in the next 6 to 12 months.
Honestly, I have meetings every week that cause me to think about the potential of all of the new technology in a different way. And it's honestly, it's exciting, but one of the issue is, I don't understand how the future of current patents and IP laws are going to impact all of this. And I think there's a huge opportunity for value for companies to proceed forward. I'm still wrapping my brain around the IP as it relates to the future of all of these technologies. But I know that there is massive opportunity, and I mean, it really. I have dozens of meetings a day, and it's always very challenging. But every time somebody comes in and gives me a new way to think about this, I'm always just kind of that just hurts. Like I'm thinking about 400 things that don't really I had never thought about before, but that makes sense. And so businesses that thread the needle, that can create both value for humans that can then create longevity. I think the biggest issue here is a lot of this stuff is libertarian, decentralized finance. I mean, inherently, we are removing the reins from the banks, from the payment systems, from the traditional finance. And when you do that, you remove the wealth the wealth consolidation. You decentralized finance inherently does that. So, I mean, creating ways to add value to humans' lives while doing that is actually challenging, because you're inherently removing the constraints that they previously faced, and you're removing the intermediaries in all of these different areas. And so it's exciting, because with that's value, but it's really just there's so much.
Yeah, and to that point, I think one of the benefits and drawbacks of blockchain technology is the modularity, is the scalability, is the plug-and-play aspect, and how you can build things on top of each other in a centralized manner, in a trustless and permissionless fashion now. Whether it's NFTs being used as digital identity credentials, or to validate your KYC customer to access a DeFi pool, or anything else, right? But I think that is the benefit too. We have the flexibility and the technology, and I think the builders in the space are smart enough to recognize that there are challenges, and they can be solved by technical means now, which we didn't really have before. Well, speaking of the combinations of technologies, I'd love to briefly touch on potentially what the role of NFTs are in the age of AI. Just to both of you, any thoughts?
Well, I think importantly, what blockchains, and especially NFTs, does is they create an immutable, authentic record. And as we're very, concerned about in the AI world, and I'm not going to profess to, be an expert in those policy issues, but there's the questions of what's authentic, what's real, what does AI create? Like, how do you know it's something that it didn't sort of hallucinate? Well, blockchain technology gives the ability to tie information to non-fungible tokens, and that ultimately allows you to create an authentic record, right? So to the extent, and I would like to use this example, when talking with people like Congressman Timmons, which is you want to give a speech, you can tie an NFT to that speech, and that's the authentic record of what you said. Anyone then can deep fake it and change it, and again, you can't control where that goes, but you do have the ability to put your stamp on it. And I think, as AI and AI blockchain start wrestling with the issues, blockchain is going to be a very important feature in how AI is consumed and ultimately, seen as a legitimate source of information.
AI is going to change our society through and through, and it's no different with blockchains, no different with digital assets, tokenization. I mean, the ability to process such massive amounts of data and create information that would require hours and hours of thought to even come up with something similar. I used it today. I literally, we had a hearing on NPR and PBS, and the question was, should we continue funding them when they are fairly biased, very biased? And I asked it to make ChatGPT to make an argument on both sides, and it was incredible. I mean, I use it in every hearing that I have just to see what AI says. That same approach to when you layer on the efficiencies, the removal of intermediaries of tokenization as it relates to stocks, privately, publicly held, as it relates to property title. I mean, all of these things, layer on layer, create efficiencies, create value to our lives. And I mean, it really is limitless. It's limitless. And going back to the regulatory structure, I mean, whatever we do this year, and we're going to do something, I promise, we have to revisit it within 5 or 10 years. I mean, we're not going to get it perfect. We're going to get it as close as we can. But if we do what we did with the internet, and 30 years later, we're still looking around going, well, that should have been different. That should have been different. Like, that's a problem. That's a real problem. So I think we have an opportunity to grow and learn from past mistakes. I think that the challenges with the legislation that facilitated the growth of the internet will be dwarfed by market structure, stable coins, tokenization. I mean, this stuff needs to be revisited more frequently, and we gotta be the best place to start to build a business. We gotta be the best place. We gotta get this right, because this is the future, and I think that it's not a partisan issue. So I think we have a lot of opportunities there, and I think there's the political will to do it. But we gotta get it right.
And I agree with that. I think that there's too much at stake to get it wrong. So we're running short on time, but last question, maybe in a few words each. What is the one thing you'd like the audience, especially the policymakers and the regulators, to take away from today's discussion about NFTs and innovation?
I mean, for me, it just, when the word NFT comes up, it can mean so many different things. So it's important that people define it correctly for what its use case is. And I think the act that the congressman has sponsored, the NFT Act, tries to distinguish between consumer use cases and financial use cases, because how you regulate one versus the other is very different. So again, terminology matters, how we use terms matter, and making sure that we just don't say all NFTs are one thing and all NFTs are something, because it's going to be so expansive. NFTs tied to property title are different than NFTs tied to NBA highlights, which are different than NFT tied to bonds, right? So let's make sure we're getting it right, the legislation defines it right, and we have that flexibility going forward.
So I'm very confident this is going to work out, but we need help. I am 40 years old. I've been in Congress for 6 years, and I think the average age of Congress is like 65. I mean,
something around there, yeah.
When you start your conversation with a member of Congress, I mean, you really have to be like, do you understand how the internet works? And the answer is going to be no. I mean, I hate to tell you this, but out of the 435 members of Congress, I bet you less than 10% could even give you like a chance at explaining it. So, I mean, to try to then go and explain tokenization, to try to explain, stable coins, all this stuff, so few members understand it. So my number one thing is advocacy is important. There's been a lot of advocacy on this issue, but we can't rest on our laurels. People that do not understand this issue need to have people that they will listen to advocate to them and say, this is important, this is why. Generally speaking, Republicans are on board. I'd say half the Democrats are on board. The ones that aren't have no idea what's going on. So you got to get people to go to them that they will meet with. I'll say it again, that they will meet with, and explain to them the importance of this. Because this is something that's not going to go away this year. We're going to get it done, but you gotta elevate the level of understanding of this. You got to elevate the understanding of the importance of this long term. And I need help. I mean, look, this is a bipartisan effort, but there's still people that don't understand it. So, I mean, I would just say that you need to invest your time and your resources into helping people that are unaware of the importance of this issue. And the importance of the U.S. economy continuing to be the future of the global economy. That's the simplest version of this. If we let this pass us by, we are done. I mean, it's a downhill slide from there. So I just need help getting in front of the people that do not work with me and make sure they understand how important this is for the future of the U.S. economy and for the future of our relevance in the global community. So, I mean, please help.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. I think this is an amazing capstone conversation to a frenetic and fun but crazy day here at the DC Blockchain Summit. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.